Okay. I thought I'd sneak on a little bit early just to make sure everything's working. And it looks like we're all good. We're all good. We're going. So, welcome everyone. I'm just going to do a couple of things just to see if it's all good. All right. So, I'm going to be able to do this. Not that one. All right. Well, while we're waiting for people to jump in, I am wondering if you would help me with putting in some words about what describes your journey with ADHD. Clearly, I need to do this one and trash that one. That's not a word that describes my journey with ADHD. I think feel free to add what you think here. But when I think about my journey with ADHD, I think of some frustration. I don't know about you. I think of some, let's see. Oh, it probably won't only let me give you one. Okay. Type in the YouTube. Hey, hi, Rebecca. Welcome. So nice to see you. I'm playing around with this software thing just before I get started for real. So, oh, yeah, look at that. Can you add in words that describe your journey with ADHD? What do you think? I'm thinking I would do. Oh, now it's making me moderate. Maybe this is not. Oh, I've got a message though. Your camera's off. That's a good one. Okay, let's see if we can figure that one out. Okay, let's see. Editing. This is going to be a pretty crummy live if I can't get the camera to work, right? Oh, Rebecca. It's working out. Okay, great. All right. Well, I'm just going to launch in then because I think I was trying to do some cool technology and yeah, I got a little distracted. Anyway, let's get to business here. I really wanted to have these discussions about ADHD, in particular, because I'm starting to have a lot of interactions with women who are being diagnosed with ADHD quite late in life. And I understand that feeling. I understand that, like, need to just shake your head and go, okay, what does this mean? How does that impact my entire life and everything I've thought before? And the experience of managing those emotions is one thing that I've been trying to help people with as I've encountered them during my the workshops that I facilitate on mental health, but also the fact that there are so many ways that we can empower ourselves once we recognize that we have ADHD and that we don't have to keep trying and trying to fit into this mold that will never be us, right? It's never going to be us. It was never meant to be us. When I said to myself a long time ago, I'm tired of fitting myself into a box, of making myself smaller. Like, do you guys ever feel like you're just too much? You're just too big. You're just too loud. You're just too excited. You're just too hyper. You're just too much for everyone. And that is, for women in particular, we learned pretty early on that in order to get the acceptance that we want, we're going to have to um, be smaller. Just be smaller, and that's kind of sad. It's certainly something that I have allowed to dictate some of the choices that I've made in my life, and haven't reached the potential that I know is in there. So that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about in terms of women with ADHD. And when I say ADHD, I'm using that global term. There are different forms of attention deficit disorders. And so you'll hear a lot about ADHD that has a hyperactive element, ADD, which is more the inattentive kind, or combined both. So there's a lot of discussion about like the three types of ADHD. But in my research, I'm finding that, I've come across some research that perhaps there are five types of ADHD. And even earlier this week, I saw some research about there being seven types of ADHD. And what it made me think of is that maybe ADHD in the global sense is a continuum. There are a lot of different things that can be impacted in your brain physically and chemically, and the symptoms are different for everyone. So it's really more of an opportunity for us to say, that's my ADHD, that's not, and get like a map, a sort of a map of our experience of ADHD. What that does is it empowers us to make the correct choices, to adapt for ourselves. So we began by understanding it, right? I think that um, when we understand something, we can then manage it better. And I think the most important thing that I really would love to encourage people with is empowerment. Like, I want people to feel like they're not, um, this diagnosis doesn't make them less, that it doesn't mean they can't do what they've always wanted to do, but that we can empower ourselves. And in fact, ADHD brains are amazing. When we can harness that potential, they're amazing. So, but let's go back to talking about, what does ADHD in the global sense look like. And I guess one thing I didn't mention in my first live stream is that it's really important to fact check and research for yourself. Um, there are so many voices out there that I'm looking at and I'm listening to, and I'm worried that people are choosing to listen to others about ADHD, and those may not necessarily be researched, evidence-based practices. So everything I'm saying too, you should also fact check, right? Like, it's as much as I'm saying to you, I've got some credentials. I'm an educator. I have children with ADHD. I have my own ADHD. I work in mental health. Um, fact check what I'm saying too, because what we really need to be careful with in this day and age is just accepting what's being told to us without, deciding for ourselves if that's true, or looking farther. So, having said that, I have these are research-based things that I'm sharing with you, but please fact check me, like, just do. And if you find anything, please let me know so that I can correct that. I don't want to be giving misinformation and adding to that struggle that people have to find correct information. So ADHD in women looks very, very different, for a number of reasons. Um, and if you think about it, so much of it goes to our education system, which I could rant on all day long. And I will if you give me the chance. But it is relevant here. So, our education system, the idea of classrooms, a teacher, desks, bells, exams, timelines, um, memorization. All the 5 year olds learning at the same thing at the same time, all the 6 year olds learning at the same thing at the same time. That education system was created at the time of the Industrial Revolution. And it was essential at that time to equip the populace to be factory workers. They needed to have efficient people to fill the factories that were beginning to be created. And if you think about our education system, I'm sorry, what it does is create perfect little factory workers, obedient. They sit still, they do their job, they listen to instructions, they memorize, they follow, one thing to another. The bell rings, they move on to the next thing. And that system was, useful at that time. But you can see from now that that system is really not creating the kind of successful people that we want in our world right now. And what it also did is really make it hard for an ADHD brain to excel, because that rigid, um, you know, structured, sit down and do your work is only one way of teaching and learning. It's one way. It's not the only way. And so here's where we go back to women with ADHD. For boys, there was still a sense of, it's just boys. Boys don't sit still. Boys need to be out running around. That was not really accepted in girls, just in terms of our, gender equality, that girls needed to have more discipline, and being quiet and being still and following instructions was very, very important. And so even if you had fantastically, um, woke parents, um, that's just a societal norm that we have, that we bump up against, right? And it's not necessarily anyone's fault, but you may have found yourself looking around at other people and noticing that they were being praised for their obedience, for how quiet they were, for how hard they were working, how much work they got done. And it's only natural to then want that praise for yourself. And whereas boys might have different avenues when they're younger, the class clown can get some praise and some acceptance. The rebel, perhaps a little bit more. There were a few less avenues for us as women, right? And I don't know, I don't want to get too much into gender, but just the idea of, at some point we chose to try to minimize our ADHD symptoms, so much so that we convinced people, right? If you think back to your schooling, um, yeah, if you got your work done and you didn't cause problems for the teacher, you were probably not identified as someone who might be struggling. And then this fact just blows my mind. This one, the idea of the hyperactivity, the H, that's not always physical. That's not always, the kid who just can't sit still and gets up and goes. It can be internal. And when I ran into that concept, I'm like, oh yeah, my brain is freaking hyper. I can sit still for a very long period of time. I can wait forever in line. I don't get impatient because my brain is so hyper. I'm entertained constantly. Perhaps your hyper is internal and you haven't recognized that hyper aspect because, like, I'm not athletic. I don't run around. That hyper idea just didn't make sense to me until I understood it as a internal, like the speed at which your thoughts are going, the rich imaginative life, the fantasy worlds that you can create. Often young girls with ADHD seem like they are in another world, like they're daydreaming all the time. And they are. Their internal world is very fascinating. And it's probably much more interesting than what's going on in their classroom. So that's how ADHD in women can present. But What's happening is that diagnosis is coming more often now. And that's important because what you can't do when you don't have the diagnosis is understand that you don't have to keep trying to fit into this mold that you were never meant to fit into. And the idea of masking is something I'd really like to touch on at some point. I'd like to really talk about what that means and how it impacts us when we're trying to be who we aren't in order to get the validation that we so desperately need and want. Um, that's a time for another topic. But what's happening is that the medical now I've lost words. Um, we are recognizing the fact that ADHD and ADD are are very hereditary. They follow family lines, and so it's sort of common practice now that if there's a child identified with ADHD, the parents will be considered. And that never used to be the case. So my son was diagnosed with ADHD at 5. I was diagnosed at 42. And I was shocked. Like, I know a lot about ADHD. I have studied, I'm an educator. Before my son was diagnosed, I'd already sort of specialized in working with those children that struggle, and ADHD, was often part of that package. Then when he was diagnosed, I became his advocate and I learned a ton about how an ADHD brain works so that I could say to him, yes, this is going to be hard, but you have some amazing superpowers. We got to unlock those. We got to work with those. So my shock at 42 to have that diagnosis was about 3 seconds long before I went, uh, oh, of course, like it's obvious. It's obvious now. But we don't see it in ourselves because it's not the same. My daughter was diagnosed shortly after. And so the three of us, now we look at each other and we go like, yeah, the ADHD is strong in our household. Oh, yes. And you should please pray for my partner because he's neurotypical. Yes, it's a hard life. I'm sorry if you're watching. Um, anyway, this is why we have so many women who are being diagnosed late in life. And what I hope to be able to do is create this community of support because what I know is that there's so much shame and a self judgment that comes with being diagnosed late in life. There are messages we get throughout our lives that we were lazy, undisciplined, unorganized, perhaps unintelligent, um, over emotional, too sensitive. Are any of these, hitting home? Those are very real symptoms of the chemicals in your brain that are different than a neurotypical brain. Your brain is physically different than a neurotypical brain. And so, what that says to me is it's not my fault, right? This isn't a character failure. This is how my brain works. And understanding it and accepting it is the very first step in choosing to work with it against instead of against it. Because I think I battled for so long trying to make my brain work the way I wanted it to work based on what I was seeing around me. Um, and I think my family said, ADHD, but you're so organized. And I laughed and said, um, do you know how many organization systems I have tried and failed? Like, yes, I'm obsessed with organization because they never work. There's always I'm like, this one will work. The color codes are going to make everything better. I'm going to buy a labeler, and when I label everything, then things will magically go back to the places where they were supposed to be. Or no, 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 it's not. It's all clear bins. When I can see everything, then I can put things away. And so what people saw in me as like being very organized was actually this frantic, desperate need to try and be organized. And honestly, nothing ever really worked for me until I began to quit trying to use all the things that a neurotypical brain uses to organize. Um, yeah. So What I think I want to talk about going forward is how we can support each other, right? How we can be there for each other as women. This is a very different experience. Um, Having ADHD as a woman, it's less understood, it's less accepted, and there's just a lot of self criticism and self judgment that doesn't help us, and it makes things so much more than we need to suffer with, right? Because frankly, there are challenges, and we want to be real about those. And in fact, I'd love to share some of the coping strategies that I have in the free video that you can access. You just have to sign up, put your email in, and one of the coping strategies that I talk about is something I've used in teaching about finding your currency, and it's all about motivation. How can you try and get that motivation activated? Um, I'm looking at my screen. I created this sort of problem solution thing that I want to do in our member website or my our member portal going forward. And I first of all I start with all the problems. Like problem number one, motivation. It's really hard to be motivated, and I have like 10 solutions right there that I can share with you. The next one, impulsivity. And again, pick and choose. Some of these are going to be yours, some are not. Impulsivity, definitely one of mine. Sometimes a decision is made before I've even had a chance to go, should I? Yes. And you can ask my family about the many stories that they have um, related to that. And I shared last time about, oh, my son. Yeah, he got a new soccer ball. Love that soccer ball. Somehow managed to find a paper clip in the car before he even had a chance to think, is this a good idea? He poked the paper clip into the soccer ball and was holding his now deflated soccer ball. All we could do was like, yeah, laugh a little bit because no, that's, yeah, impulsivity. The third problem, rejection sensitivity. Um, ADHD brains are hyper aroused to criticism and judgment. Um, and it's less understood why. It's just understood that it's very much a very real thing that we struggle with in terms of we're looking for people to criticize. Like it doesn't take much. And I know the people that love someone with ADHD know they're like look at me like, you're mad at me, right? Like, no. Why would you think? Well, you looked at me. And so I'm pretty sure that you're mad at me. Like, we're looking for it because we feel that shame and that judgment all the time. Um, Next problem, low self esteem. You can see how this snowballs. And again, I have a ton of resources and suggestions and coping strategies for that. Poor organization. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Um, Organizing requires a certain executive functioning skill that we struggle with. Time blindness. Time blindness can run up a few ways. First of all, you think you have more time to do things than you ever actually do, so you run out of time constantly and you're racing to get to the next thing. Or when you are focused on something you're really interested in, time just slips through your fingers and it can be 5 hours. You haven't eaten, you haven't moved suddenly, and you're like, whoa, okay, 5 hours just went by. Time blindness, it's a real thing. Communicating effectively. An ADHD brain has difficulty communicating in an assertive way um, with healthy boundaries. Regulating emotions are difficult. So our relationships are really impacted. And if anything, we need strong relationships, right? This isn't an easy road, and we need our people to really understand us, and that takes communication. And so building those skills really important. And then the last one is the emotional regulation. We do have more difficulty regulating the emotions that we have. They can be out of control, huge mood swings. It's like all or nothing. That can be an ADHD symptom as well. So even though I've listed all of these problems, right? It's kind of grim. The point is that I have so many ways that we could talk about addressing those together. So many ways that we could come together as a community and share our ideas. And so I'm pushing for that vision. I'm hoping there's some people that want to come alongside and be part of this circle of super women, just, journeying together. Because, I can't offer you solutions. If you look around my studio right now, you will see a lot of disorganized hot mess. However, what I do know is that acceptance of my limitations and focusing on the amazing things that come with this ADHD brain have made a huge impact in my life in terms of my self esteem and my confidence and my ability to be who I am in my own skin and not smaller than I was ever meant to be. If I'm too much now for someone, that's okay. That's fine. You don't have to be in my world, right? I don't want to be smaller anymore. I don't want to try to fit into the mold of a neurotypical brain, because then I'm losing out all of the amazing creativity, um, connection, the speed at which our thoughts move, the connections we can make. I know you know what I'm talking about. People are, it's like the world is slow, right? You have to wait for them to finish their sentences because it's rude to just finish it for them. But you know what they're going to say, and you've already moved on to the thought after that. Um, you're learning something and you're waiting for everybody else. You're like, I got that. Let's move on. But then there's other things that seem to take forever to really process and really figure out. And that's frustrating because you never know, am I going to get it like this, or is this going to be something that I'm going to have to try again and again and again to figure out? Um, and then the creativity, ADHD comes with a unique perspective and, often some significant creative skills and talent, and pushed in the right direction where you let that grow. um, some of the most amazing talented people are those with an ADHD brain. The innovators of our world, the creatives, the people who don't fit the mold. Yeah, because remember way back when we started talking about the education system, that mold is for factory workers. We don't want to fit that mold, right? And in fact, we want our education system to change now, 20 years ago, actually, because what we don't need are people who can memorize things, repeat it to you, follow instructions, switch when the bell rings. We need us. We need innovators, and we need people to say, hey, you're valuable. You don't have to sit still. You can walk around the classroom as long as you figure out, how to answer this question, go for it. Um, that's what we need. And so it begins with us, right, ladies? Like, we need to advocate for our kids. And the best way we can do that is to be the best version of ourselves. I've learned that in my mental health journey as well, that as much as I wanted, my kids to get the resources and the support in the struggle that they were facing, it was true that the support I got helped them too. When I was stronger, they could then, trust that I was there for them. And this is the same. If you have kids with ADHD, you need to build yourself up. You need to be the expert in your ADHD so that you can advocate for yourself and for them. And so this is where it begins, right? And I'm really excited, and I hope that we have like just an overwhelming response of people jumping on board, like jump on the bandwagon, let's go. And that's all I've got for you today. But I hope it was something helpful. And if you find this, a month down the road, 2 months down the road, hopefully we'll be here and you just send us a message, join our group, join our tribe. We want you all. All right. Well, my friends, I'm going to close there. Thank you to all of you who joined us for today, and take care. See you soon. Bye.